What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of National Pastime and Happy New Year. The only new year that I actually celebrate, which is the start of the NFL league year. It's been a fun few days, and the league now has its legal tampering period that we get to enjoy leading up to the actual kickoff of the deals being official as of today. But how did you celebrate the new year, Toaster?
By pulling an all-nighter and starting a second job. So happy to be here.
By second job, you mean outside of this podcast?
This is numero uno for me.
Okay.
Just like Jason from OTC, you got to be prepped for these 3 days of free agency frenzy. It's been fun. And I think, as always, with National Pastime, quarterbacks lead the way.
Yes, definitely. And we might as well start with what was frankly the most surprising news. Well, I guess depending on who you are, but Tom Brady is coming back.
So Giselle's
everybody
surprised.
Yes, exactly. The jokes flying on my Twitter feed about like Tom Brady having to spend more than 5 minutes with his kids and immediately saying like, nah, you know what, I think I'll go back are pretty good. But that aside, the Brady situation actually, I think, is pretty impactful when you look at the effect that it has on the rest of the league and this free agency period, because that was going to be essentially an open quarterback destination. And they were in a spot where without Brady, do they make a big play or do they tear this thing down? And clearly, as we've seen with Brady coming back, a lot of that team is now re-signing for another go at this thing. So I think it was a pretty big domino, but what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily the team being torn down as much as the team just jumping ship, quite frankly, as a Buccaneer. Because if you don't have Tom Brady there, then what's your reason to stay, right? They brought back all 22 starters last year, and Tom Brady needed to make that announcement the day that he did. Mostly to F over CBS and, Selection Sunday and the whole March Madness thing. Now that those kids have NIL deals, they could be competing with him for
fuck them kids.
Top played athlete. Yeah. But I think he realized, in my opinion, he truly wanted to play his way out of Tampa Bay. I 100% believe that he thinks Bruce Arians a dick, because Bruce Arians is a dick. Whether or not that means that he didn't want to play for him anymore could be, argued, but Bruce Arians is a dick. Let's just get that squared away right now. But if he didn't come back on Sunday, the legal tampering period began, which they need to change the name of that anyways, because just take anything litigation wise out of, the NFL. You guys have enough legal issues. You don't have to actually just highlight it right there that we're saying you are allowed to break the rules legally right now. But
by the way, the first deal during the legal tampering period came out within the first minute of that time hitting. So
time change, man. Time change.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. There we go.
But no, so Tom Brady called up Ryan Jensen, said, hey, let's run this back. And, that to me was the biggest thing. I think they'll ultimately get Gronk on. Carlton Davis wasn't going to sign if Brady wasn't there. And hot take, I think Bill Belichick wants Tom Brady to retire as a Patriot.
Oh,
why else do you give up Shaq Mason, a top 5 rated guard, for a 5th round pick?
Okay, so that was one of those things where if any other GM makes that move,
you're obliterated.
You're like, what the fuck is this idiot doing? Bill Belichick does it. It was like barely a blip on the radar. People were just like, oh, okay, sure.
And now they have interest in Lyle Collins with, history of, I don't want to say history of performance enhancing drugs, because technically he missed his drug test and that's where the suspension came from. But same age, he's a higher paid athlete at this point, and you have to give up draft capital for him. It makes no sense other than saying, hey, Brady, here's the keys to the Corvette. drive it as long as you want, but just remember where your bread was buttered originally.
I don't think Bill operates that way, but I'll ride with you on that conspiracy theory. So
He's still,
yeah,
I think he's trying to, he doesn't trust that Tampa Bay can make it back to the Super Bowl without some of these concessions. He's like, the only way I'm going to be able to say that it was me and not you is if I beat you in the Super Bowl.
there you go. That is more plausible. That is more plausible for sure. So Brady returns. The Bucks. You look at their roster, even with some pieces going away. You have Tom Brady, and with how he played last year, you're going to be one of the top 3 teams in the NFC, very likely. It makes sense. The NFC is pretty devoid of top tier talent as of right now. We'll definitely get into some of these AFC teams that are loading up.
But yeah, I mean, they were in the quarterback hunt like every other team in the NFC South at that point, because now the Falcons are in on the Watson train, the Panthers are in on the Watson train, and the Saints are in on the Watson train. So this is I think, clearly division favorites, and all it takes is getting into the playoffs. So it made sense for him to come back at this point. And obviously Aaron Rodgers is still there, but I don't think anyone's scared of Aaron Rodgers past the NFC Championship game anymore. So the Rams are losing some talent. The 49ers still technically have Jimmy G. Like it's wide open for him to make another run.
Yeah, I mean, the Packers have retained a few of those pieces on that team, but otherwise they've had to cut bait with a few depth pieces that really make a difference. They're not going to be as strong. They're going to need Rodgers to carry them. So it makes total sense if you're Brady. Like, obviously, there's no mystique anymore of playing in Lambeau in December and January. So fuck it, right?
You got to get rid of that heated turf. That was the worst investment they could have made.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, speaking of the rest of the NFC South and Deshaun Watson, I will caveat this conversation by saying I still don't really like talking about him right now. It still feels weird with everything going on. I know he avoided the criminal charges and all that, but it feels dirty. But you mentioned the Falcons, the Saints, and the Panthers are all in on him, as well as, remind me, there's one other team, believe an AFC team.
It's the Browns.
The Browns. There we go. So there's really those 4 suitors right now for him. He's accepted offers, or the Texans have accepted offers, preliminary offers from all of those teams. Watson has met with those teams. He has no trades, so he is ultimately determining where he wants to go. It could happen tonight, though it sounds like he's probably going to take the night to think about it. And
go get a massage, figure out,
clear his head. Totally. Yeah. But of those situations, I think the one that's most intriguing to me is the Falcons, because they have obviously Matt Ryan there. They passed on taking Justin Fields last year in the first round of the draft. They went with Kyle Pitts, who had a great rookie year by all accounts, but is a tight end. And it was reported that they were restructuring.
We're going Justin Fields over Mac Jones. Sorry, I just had to jump in there. Playoff quarterback first year.
You're right. Yeah. But I think the weirdest part about all of it is it was reported that Ryan was going to restructure his deal once again, which the Falcons, as we've noted several times in our show, are like, they might be in the worst cap situation of anybody over the next couple of years here. And they're continuing to push money to the future. Turns out that deal wasn't actually processed. So what would have been a $50+ million dead cap if they get rid of Matt Ryan here is now still only 40. So a little more manageable. But that situation, if they acquire Watson, how does that work? Like the mechanics of that deal?
They technically have the space to hold on to both of them. I would assume that there's no way that Ryan's not traded until post June 1, because there's a negative $20 million in cap savings if you trade him pre June 1. A little bit of relief if you trade him post June 1. And I think that the expectations for the Falcons are that we have somebody young. I don't remember what the extension was ultimately for Watson, but it's got to be at least in the 4 or 5 year range. And if you can dump Matt Ryan, get $8 million in cap savings, find somebody that has a quarterback that goes down during training camp, something like that, or somebody that feels like they're just a little bit away from making the playoffs, like maybe the Browns if they don't want Baker Mayfield. It's an interesting scenario that they could ultimately hold $90 million at the quarterback position against the cap and just wait to offload Matt Ryan till post June 1. There's no way they move on from Matt Ryan pre June 1. It's just not tenable. So the only way this is happening is if they think they're going to find a suitor for Matt Ryan long term, and they just want to basically hold their cards until something develops. And I think ultimately it will, right? Like worst case, you flip them for something late round and just call it a day because you've got your quarterback of the future.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at, I mean, and we can get into some of the other options. You mentioned the Browns and Baker and that whole situation, but looking at least those 3 NFC South teams, which of them do you think makes the most sense for Deshaun Watson? I mean, I want to say Carolina does. And we know Tepper is willing to make a big move and he pursued Watson last year. He pursued Watson, frankly, throughout this whole process. One of the only teams that has. And I would assume they're going to make a strong push. I don't know what Deshaun's necessarily looking for, but if you had to guess at this point, where do you think he ultimately ends up?
If I had to guess, I think that the Saints is probably where he'll end up. But if I were him, I would take the flyer with the. I was obviously on the Panthers last year. That didn't work out great for me. Sam Darnold is just a fantastic $18 million quarterback. There's more intrigue, there's more upside there with CMC in the backfield as long as he's healthy. I mean, how do you stop that? To me, that's a Kamara situation, right? CMC, Kamara, they're very similar. If Sean Payton was in New Orleans right now, I would definitely say that's where he's going. But I like the intrigue of Carolina and the fact that Tepper's going to do whatever I want, quite frankly, right? He's like, You are my investment. I'm going to invest in my investment. Tell me what you want. And I don't think that you get that everywhere else, right? Like Mickey Loomis, I'm not going to say that his hands are tied, but he's kicked a lot of cap down the road multiple times. Like if you say, I want this or that, there may not always be the flexibility there. And
everyone had to be cap compliant by today, right? Or by that deadline today. So the Saints, I don't know what they're sitting at right now.
Per OTC, it's $775,000 in cap space.
Okay. They're also 5 teams that are currently listed as being over the cap. Over the cap. There you go. But yeah, so the Saints are somehow cap compliant. But yeah, I agree. I think there's less flexibility in that roster versus the Panthers, who right now have $32 million in cap space. And
you could sign 1.5 Christian Kirks.
Oh yeah, we will definitely get to that deal in a second. But even looking forward for the Panthers, 2023, they're still sitting at $75 million in available cap space. And obviously Watson would take up some of that, but Darnold would come off the books at that point for them as well. I think I agree with you. Ultimately, the Saints, especially if Sean Payton was there, would be a slam dunk. The Falcons, I don't know, man. I just think they're in a really tough position.
What do you want to compete with Tom Brady this year, I mean, you have to anyways, right? Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what team you ultimately go to unless you go to the Browns, and that's not exactly a slam dunk division either, with Mitch Trubisky taking over for the Steelers. So, to me, it's you don't look at what else is there in that
Yeah.
division. At that point, you say, what is the best situation for me? And I
Mhm.
trust Tepper to surround me with as much talent as I ultimately beg, cry, and plead for.
Yes. So we should have a Watson resolution fairly soon, and I think that will really be the domino that kickstarts a lot of this other movement. So we've previously called out the teams that are in the market for quarterbacks. We've mentioned a couple of them already. The Browns look like whether or not they get Deshaun Watson are now going to be in the market. I believe the report that Chris Mortensen received today was that the Browns, and this is post Baker Mayfield's social media posts. For anyone that hasn't read, Baker basically did a goodbye message to Cleveland, even though nothing's actually happened. But Chris Mortensen received a note from a source basically saying that the Browns are looking for an adult in that position, which somewhat question the logic behind going after Deshaun Watson and all of his shit that he's got. But regardless, Baker Mayfield seems to be on his way out.
Wait, so they're gonna take Josh McCown now?
What?
Well, the
I,
Texans wanted to hire him as a head coach, and now the Browns are gonna take him as a quarterback because he's an adult.
oh, maybe. Yeah, you never know. If the bar is that low, I mean,
Yeah,
why not, right? But yeah, so we've got Baker possibly moving now. We've got Jimmy G that we know is sort of been in flux here for a little while. If the Falcons acquire Matt Ryan, or sorry, Falcons acquire Deshaun Watson, then Matt Ryan becomes available. So this Deshaun Watson move really sets in motion a lot of other pieces here. You mentioned one team that may have been involved in some of this, but probably isn't anymore, is Pittsburgh. They signed Mitch Trubisky. I like that deal for Mitch. It's, I don't, frankly, I'll say I don't understand how teams thought he was only worth $2.5 million last year, and all of a sudden he's worth whatever, 7.5. But
yeah.
after not playing, but regardless, it's backup money for Mitch. But I don't think it keeps the Steelers ultimately from drafting a quarterback, but it probably takes them out of the running from going after one of these bigger guys, whether that's Baker, who obviously doubtful trade within the division, but Jimmy G, or I don't even know who's Jameis Winston, one of those guys. So the
Teddy
Watson
Bridgewater, no,
situation,
Bridgewater's in Miami now. Sorry.
yep. Teddy is playing closer to Tua.
Hmm.
And yeah, well, you know, it feels like Groundhog Day to some degree, sitting here talking about Deshaun Watson getting traded in March. But, that will really, I think, set the tone for a lot of these teams. And I mean, there's other players ultimately that are available here too. Like Kirk Cousins is been talked about as being on the block, although he's got his extension now, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think that eliminates that. He's
so they're
coming. He's
committed
coming
there.
for Green Bay right now. Obviously, just sure it's a Saturday afternoon game.
Yeah. But so we sit and wait on Watson, and we'll see ultimately how that plays out. But any last thoughts on Deshaun before we move on here?
No, I'm with you. I feel weird talking about it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I trust the criminal justice situation. I just want to say hearts out to the girls that ultimately probably truly felt wronged and that didn't rise to the proper level for a criminal. But he still does have those civil investigations, and I don't see there's any way that he doesn't get a 6-game suspension regardless of the criminal side of things. So I don't know how much
Yeah.
that takes into account the trade compensation.
Right.
Or maybe you keep Matt Ryan there for the first 6 games, right? Like maybe that's why they're involved.
Trade him at the
But
deadline.
exactly.
Oh,
But no,
this just in, Buccaneers have reached an agreement with Chris Godwin on a 3-year, $60 million deal that includes $40 million fully guaranteed at signing. So the Bucks are getting the band back together, although I don't know when Godwin necessarily will be available quite
What do
yet.
you mean back to get Antonio Brown's still a free agent? He hasn't signed with the Ravens yet.
Oh God, that's gonna be a fun one. The Ravens actually have made some decent moves, but looking at some teams now, transitioning maybe away from the quarterbacks here, we got to talk about what the fuck the Jacksonville Jaguars have been doing here. The biggest situation, like biggest contract they've handed out, which makes zero sense to me, is Christian Kirk, who there were reports going into the legal tampering period that teams were looking to give Kirk around $15 million a year, which frankly for me was about double what I would have paid him annually. And Jacksonville comes out of here and offers him a 70. Wait, what is the total value of the deal here? 72?
72.
Is that what it was?
72 yep. Is the without incentives number. 84 is the with
incentives number. Yeah. So essentially per year, obviously, and you're looking at the incentives number, he's making more per year than Chris Godwin is. This guy that's never had a 1,000-yard season ever. And
well, I mean, he's had already peaked Kyler Murray as his quarterback, so that hurt him.
yes, big. That definitely hurt him. But like, I don't understand. And then Jacksonville goes out and signs Zay Jones. They let DJ Chark walk. Like, I mean, they're throwing money.
He costs $10 million. Like, we don't want it. Like, we can't just throw good money after bad.
Yeah, that's Christian Kirk's money. To be fair, yeah. That's Christian Kirk's money. I mean, just looking at some of the other deals they've given out. So Evan Ingram at $9 million. I think that's great.
That's reasonable.
Evan Ingram is essentially a slot player. Christian Kirk, essentially a slot player. Laviska Shenault, essentially a slot player. How the fuck are they going to do that? They've given out.
I mean, oh wait, sorry, Urban Meyer's not there anymore because he certainly seemed like a slot player. If you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah. But the rest of these deals, right? So Brandon Sheriff, good player, 3 years, $49.5 million. Foyesade Oluokun, 3 years, $45 million, 28 guaranteed. I mean, they're throwing money around, and I know they had a ton of space, but I think
that's the craziest part to me. If you look at how they structured some of these deals, Christian Kirk, he only has a minimum base salary. It's only $1.5 million. Everything's in prorated bonus and kicking it down the road. His so base salaries, the base salaries, his cap number this year is only 7.5, and then it explodes to 21.5. Everything on the future 4 deals is plus 20. And it's like, why don't you absorb that now when you don't have to pay
Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes no fucking sense, man. Trent Baalke, I like the Doug Peterson move. I think Doug Peterson is going to do good things for Trevor Lawrence. I think their offense will be fine as long as Trevor takes a step next year, and I expect him to. But Trent Baalke being in charge of this team still is just...
He already ran one organization into the ground, so why not do it to another?
Jags are just going to jag, apparently. Yeah. So absolutely wild what the Jaguars are doing. They might approach some spending records if they continue to do it over the course of this free agency period. So we'll see.
They might get as much production out of that spending as the Patriots did last year. Nelson Aguilar and
Hunter
Henry, and why can't I think of Jonnu Smith? That's what it was.
Judon.
Yeah.
All right. Let's transition to a team that has turned themselves into a very, very scary contender with the moves that they've made. The Los Angeles Chargers. The deal with the Bears to acquire Khalil Mack is now official. So they have Khalil Mack opposite Joey Bosa. They've went out and signed J.C. Jackson. Again, the beauty of having a quarterback on a rookie deal in Justin Herbert, who also, just also happens to be a fucking like freak of nature. But they go out and acquire who I think is probably the most impactful defender that was available in J.C. Jackson. And now you look at their team. They added another defensive tackle as well, the guy from the Rams, forget his name, but solid player.
Sebastian Joseph Day.
Yes. And, God willing, Derwin James is healthy. They go out, they draft Jordan Davis potentially at 17. And all of a sudden that defense is fucking stout. And they re-sign Mike Williams. And that is a scary, scary team in a division that is frankly scary.
Scary division. Yeah. We can technically have 4 teams from the same division now. Is that what it is? It's 3 wild cards, right?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, 7 teams. So division winner and 3 wild card teams. Obviously, the inbreeding as far as wins and losses hurts a little bit, but right. That's a very scary division. If the Chargers can stop the run, that team is no longer needing to go for it on 4th down anymore because Brandon Staley can trust his defense to get a stop. And to me, I think these moves make them the favorite in that division, quite frankly. The drop off between Mahomes and Herbert is nowhere near as much as the accolades we'll say, just because obviously you can't touch what Mahomes was able to do in the first 3 years of his career. That's basically untenable. But getting Williams back, having Keenan Allen, that offense I think will be successful. And if they can get stops on defense, that was why they brought Brandon Staley in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't able to do it last year, but now he's got the talent to do so.
Yeah, I think that's the one part of the Khalil Mack move that's maybe the most underrated is I've obviously, as a Bears fan, gotten to watch him up close for the last 4 years. But when most people think of Khalil Mack, they probably think of this guy that just destroys quarterbacks. Khalil Mack is one of the best run defenders in the entire NFL. So he's going to set the edge, and you obviously have Bosa teeing off on the other end. If they can get any, again, I'm just, as a fan of football, if I'm hoping Jordan Davis gets to them at 17 and they don't overcomplicate this thing, because that fucking monster eating up 2 blocks in the middle of that defense, they will be able to sit in 2 high. They will get after the quarterback with 4 down linemen. And I mean, J.C. Jackson and Derwin James are just going to feast, and Asante Samuel Jr., right? I mean, that defense is fucking nasty. And with Justin Herbert calling the show, running the show at quarterback, the Chargers, I mean, good for them. Like teams, now granted, not everybody lucks into a Justin Herbert the way that they necessarily did, but when your window, yeah, they should be thanking the Dolphins every fucking day for that. But to recognize when your window is there, despite the rest of that division and what they've done, and to attack it in this way is, I mean, the Chargers are going to be fucking fun. And I really hope that fans show up at SoFi to watch them play. But that division is going to be wild. I mean, so Mack and Bosa, you have Chandler Jones, who just signed a pretty lucrative deal with the Vegas Raiders, and they traded Yannick Ngakoue. So you have Chandler Jones and Max.
He's been traded in the last 2 years.
Yeah, seriously, poor guy. He's a good player too. But Chandler Jones and Max Crosby in I almost said Oakland, Vegas. You have Bradley Chubb and Randy Gregory, who was a coup for the Broncos. He was supposed to be going back to the Cowboys, turned around and is signing in Denver. And then in Kansas City, you've got Chris Jones and Frank Clark still. Like, that division, just top to bottom. I don't care if every single primetime game in this NFL schedule is an AFC West game. Like, give me as much of that level of football as possible. But the Chargers getting J.C. Jackson, Khalil Mack, I mean, they knocked it out of the park. I mean, they are the clear winners in my mind so far, even though they haven't spent necessarily the most money like the Jags.
Yeah. No, they've done it effectively. I just pray that Jimmy G doesn't end up with the Las Vegas Raiders and we can actually enjoy the AFC West this year, because the amount of talent on the defense versus the amount of talent on the offense is just freaking fun.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, I guess somewhat Broncos connected here. Another deal that, just getting into some deals that surprised me, seeing the numbers on the Von Miller deal. So Von signs with the Bills. So don't forget the fucking Bills in the AFC, by the way. But Von Miller, 6 years, 120 million. I mean, I know. Thankful to, you know, the guys at Over the Cap and, you know, our conversations that we have and, you know, whatever, that essentially now when you see a contract number come through in the NFL, you need to look at a couple things. Don't look at the total number because otherwise
Aaron Rodgers taught us this, right? Just like, don't believe the reports. That's not, we need to see the actual deal before to your assumptions.
It's not 50 million a year. It's actually 62. Okay. Get it right. No, I was going to say Taysom Hill probably taught us this the most, but like, you know, you need to look at the guarantees, right? You need to look at the contract structure and all of those things. So the Von Miller deal is not 6 years for 120 million, but it's 51.5 million guaranteed and 45 million guaranteed at signing. Essentially turns it into a 3-year, $51.5 million deal. But he now becomes
a 33-year-old player.
For a 33-year-old player that was frankly declining over the last couple of years.
In the regular season, he was pedestrian. He showed up in the playoffs, and that's all it takes, man. Put some good film in the national spotlight, and you get paid.
Well, I think that's all the Bills are hoping for, right? They're like, look, man, you can take it easy. We'll put you on a pitch count all year. Just show up when the playoffs come. But his $45 million at signing guarantees that Von Miller will be the highest paid non-quarterback ever in the history of the NFL. I believe Larry Fitzgerald was that held that crown up until Von Miller signed on the dotted line in Buffalo. But crazy contract, good for Von. It's comparable to what Chandler Jones got in Vegas. So, you know, it makes sense from that standpoint. But whether he is Von Miller of old or not, we've seen him still be able to have an impact in spurts in a way that few guys can. And that is a huge asset to Buffalo. I don't particularly love like the amount of money that they're spending. You know, you have the Josh Allen extension looming now, and that's going to obviously affect how they do business. But I appreciate them continuing to push their chips in when they have a legitimate shot with a legitimate quarterback. So that deal I thought was really interesting. What was your initial thought there?
I was happy for the Patriots because outside of this year, to me, it's, I'm not going to say crippling by any means, but it's a lot of money to tie up in somebody that's going to be a 34, 35-year-old pass rusher. Calais Campbell's shown that it can still be done, but once they have to start paying Allen, that's quite a bit of cap commitment to two players on the team, and I just don't know that he's going to be able to reap that impact, quite frankly. I mean, they've got Gregory Rousseau, and pairing them together could be a little bit of a rejuvenation, but he's been in a great situation. I mean, can you have a better situation than what the Rams were last year? And he still wasn't able to make, you know, at least not from a statistical standpoint. We talked about this with Khalil Mack all the way, right? He may not put up the stats, but he makes the impact, and I don't think Miller had either. So I'm ultimately happy that that's where he went. I don't see why he didn't go back to the Broncos. I thought that would have been the most fun, the best, you know, way to cap out your career. Go back and try to make a Super Bowl run with the Broncos. I mean, do we think that Obviously, the Broncos have a lot more competition within the division. Do we really think that the Broncos are that far off of the Bills as far as competing for a Super Bowl as long as they both get into the playoffs? I mean, I think that becomes a decently even matchup.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, yeah, what's the Randy Gregory deal? Do you know off the top of your head? I can look it up here
Uh,
real quick.
Not off the top of my head, but we can look it up here
So
too.
it looks like it's a total of 70,
75 ish. It's 70. Yep.
70 over
5 years.
years.
And that was the
So
same that he was going to get with the Cowboys, but the Cowboys wanted to put in some uh, extra language around suspensions, personal conduct, that sort of stuff. And so he went to where weed was legal, I think.
yeah, there you go. But so I wonder how much of this was the Broncos deciding that Gregory was their guy over Vaughn ultimately, especially at that price. Um, you know, 70 over 5 is, and it's fully guaranteed. Looks like it was 18 at signing. Um, looks like maybe 28 total guaranteed. Does that look right to you? 30 fully
Yeah,
guaranteed.
30 fully.
So
Well, I think 2 million's roster bonus. So yeah, 28. But no, I mean 3 years younger and has the lesser price tag, right? I mean, we're talking a $50 million difference over one extra year.
yeah. So it makes sense for Denver, especially as they're going to run back this season with Russ on his current deal, but I'd imagine they're going to rip that up fairly soon, and Russ will be paid handsomely. So yeah, I mean, interesting situation. It felt like it came out of nowhere, right? Like you probably didn't expect the Bills to be all that aggressive in free agency and to throw that big of a number at a pretty big name surprised me.
Yep. No,
Um,
same.
another big name that came out today, kind of out of left field, but the Titans are cutting Julio Jones a year after giving up a second and a fourth for him. It saves them that
And
he's
to be clear, the second is this year, so they're essentially cutting somebody that won't be on their team and giving up a second round draft pick this year for that.
yeah, and it saves them. It's going to save them around $9 million. He is a post June 1 cut designation, so he is free to find a new team, but they don't get all of that cap relief until after June 1st. So, but I was just frankly shocked. I know he was hurt last year, which, at his age and all that stuff is always going to be an issue for him. But to move on from that so quickly was a surprising move to me. Do you think it was the right move really for them?
I with their cap situation right now, they were right up against it, so I can somewhat see it. But that was just a failed front office decision at that point. You went all in trying to get Julio to compete last year, and now you're tail between the legs saying that did not work out. What do you have at this point, right? Like he's going to count 9 million dead against the cap. Tannehill proved that without him, he's not a superior quarterback. You only have AJ Brown left. I don't know what you do at this point. Like this, to me, this is kind of the downfall of the Titans. If the Colts actually had a quarterback, I would say that they were in trouble. But you've got the Colts with no quarterback, the Texans with no quarterback, and the Jaguars paying Christian Captain Kirk $84 million. So the division's open, and if they can get somebody in, they can compete again. But I think they've shown that Tannehill's not their guy right now.
Yeah.
So I just
He's not taking them to the next level anyway.
right. Yeah. So I don't know, that division's got to be the worst in the NFL at this point, right? Well, maybe it's still a decent division, but once Deshaun Watson gets traded, then it's the worst division.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, the NFC East is still pretty bad, but I think the AFC South takes it for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So there's still a pretty decent list of guys that remain unsigned right now. Is there anyone that surprises you that is available that hasn't signed a deal, especially with some of these lesser players like Christian Kirk getting a big deal?
Yeah, no, I think those types of deals are what screwed everything over, because I would have said Allen Robinson, quite frankly, but
Hmm.
I don't know what his value is at this point if Kirk's getting 17.5 million a year. Like, how do you have that discussion? The Browns just gave up a 5th round pick for Amari Cooper at a $20
Hmm.
million hit. Like, Allen's
Hmm.
not going to get $27 million on the free agent market right now. Um, so the entire wide receiver position to me is kind of out. Like, I think it needs to reset with one more signing before the top tier guys go. Even DJ Chark getting 10 million seems a little aggressive based on his output last year.
Hmm.
And I would say I can't be surprised by any, because any of the top tier guys I think are still feeling out where they can make the most money. I'm most excited for Matthew. I almost texted you earlier. I was just like, can you imagine Matthew on the 49ers? Like, how fun would that be? And then I was
Oh,
like, can you imagine Matthew on any team? How fun that would be. I just love the guy's energy and just
I
how
love
much
him.
passion he has. So wherever he wants to go, that's the signing that I think that's left that I'm most interested in. Um, Pray not the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I love Tyrann Mathieu. I'm very much hoping the Bears have a spot open at safety. Would love to see them throw some money at him. Can we? I want to talk about Allen Robinson for a second here. I always am in favor of players betting on themselves. Um, the situation that has played out over the last year has really fucked him.
Yeah.
Um, it's tough to know too, like how much is actually true and whatever, how much is made up, because there are so many reports coming out now about how terribly Nagy handled a lot of situations. One of them with Robinson and Pace. Who knows? That relationship was so frayed, but essentially he plays on the tag last year, plays like shit, and I know there's a lot of circumstances involved in that, but he very clearly by the end of the season had quit. I mean, plenty of plays that it looked like he was just taking them off. And when you look at this market now, you know, Chris Godwin is at 20 mil a year. That's probably his ceiling, right? And that's what he was asking the Bears for previously. And I don't think he gets that now based on what we're looking at. And it's a tough situation. Like, the teams that were looking at him, the Lions were one. They went out and got gave Chark $10 million. Probably doesn't stop them, I would guess, from going after Robinson still, but it's less likely. The Jags were the other one, and they just went out and gave a bunch of money to Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. They're not going to give Allen Robinson more than Christian Kirk is making per year, I would
Mhm.
assume. So they're out. And I know there's other teams involved, like the Patriots, and there's talk that maybe he could come back to the Bears now with new management. I don't know, but like he might have to play on another short-term deal, right? And just try to
Yeah.
get back to the market.
He has to, and that means he has to go to a competitive team. The one I have earmarked for him right now is the Raiders at this point. Raiders or Colts. With the Colts not having quarterback, he's not going to rebuild his value there right now. Panthers are too undecided. It may be an opportunity where he signs low with the Cowboys. That's the only other option I really see for him, and say,
Mhm.
okay, I'll take a below market deal and know that we're going to be in an explosive offense, because that's just how they like to roll around Dallas. But yeah, it's tough for him. I agree with you. I like players betting on themselves, and ultimately you have to have the effort there if you're going to bet on yourself. And I can completely understand how it's difficult to do that with Nagy basically sabotaging the team for the Bears. But
Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, you mentioned the Patriots. I don't see him on the Patriots at all. Just too much money. That's not what they're going to draft another first round bust at wide receiver. That's what they like to do. They don't like to ultimately pay money at that position.
Belichick will take one look. There's one play in particular that sticks in my mind with Robinson this year, where Fields broke out of the pocket, was running down the left sideline. And if Robinson just gives half of a shit on a downfield block, Fields probably scores like a 40-yard rushing touchdown. And it was against the Packers. And he completely pulled up. Fields had to run out of bounds. It ended up being like a 17-yard gain. And my first thought, because the Patriots have been mentioned with Robinson for over a year since all this has gone on, my first thought was, yeah, Bill Belichick seeing that play and going, nope. I feel for the guy, but his situation has turned out really bad, considering what he was possibly looking at, 2 years ago here, a year and a half ago.
Most ironic will be him going back to the Steelers, or going to the Steelers and playing with Mitch Trubisky again. That would be fun.
There's no fucking way. I don't think he can do it. I don't think he could do it. The one last name that stands out to me. So you mentioned Tyrann Mathieu, Allen Robinson, but the last name is Teron Armstead. And I know injury concerns are there, but premier position, very, very good player. And I'm a little shocked, honestly, that he hasn't been signed quite yet, even on a maybe shorter term, higher AAV deal or something. I'm a little surprised there, but there's still some really good players out, and we'll see how that sort of wraps up in the next few days.
I'm surprised, other than the lack of competition at that position for a premier tackle. So I think that he's willing to feel it out because he doesn't feel like he's going to be usurped. He's not going to get something that resets the market or destroys his value with a low signing. He just at that you pay a premium, and he's going to hold out to see
Till he gets it.
where he can make the most money. Right? It's not an oversaturated market like wide receiver right now, right? Like you've got Jarvis Landry out there. Now you've got Julio Jones out there, Odell Beckham, Allen Robinson that we just discussed, right? Like the market is different there. And I feel like he wants to bide his time.
Yep. Agreed. All right. I think that's the majority of the big moves here. We haven't really gotten into the Rodgers deal all that much, although if I'm being completely honest with you, it confuses the hell out of me. Just looking at it. So he's playing under his current contract for this year. Is that right?
Yes.
And then the new deal kicks in. Essentially it's like,
well, sorry, I want to say he did reduce his cap this year. I don't think he changed his total money for this year, but he did drop his cap from like 40 to 28.
Okay. Looking at the numbers of this deal, they're just fucking wild. And, it goes technically to his age 43 season. Who knows if he'll get there, but I mean, his dead money hit. These are the things that crack me up. If they cut him after next season, they take a $100 million dead cap hit. If they cut him after 2023, it's still $68 million. If they cut him after 2024, $45 million. Like, these dead cap hits are massive. And I get that the Packers had to do it, right? You have a roster that's largely built to win now. The NFC is very winnable. Aaron Rodgers back-to-back MVP probably gives you the best chance to continue your dominance of the NFC North, all these things. This contract is fucking them for the next few years.
No, it's fucking Jordan Love for the next few years, because he's saying, no matter what you want to do, I'm the starting quarterback, bitch.
Yeah. Technically, this contract has fucked Jordan Love since he was drafted and it was even written. So this deal fucks Jordan very hard. But Devontae Adams right now, apparently the Packers offered him a deal around Christian Kirk level money, and he declined it. Says he won't play on the tag. We'll see how that ultimately plays out. Do you think Devontae Adams is actually liable to leave or hold out because they won't give him his money because all of his money is now Aaron's money?
Sorry, I need to regroup. We just talked about Christian Kirk getting $17.5 million again, and it just every single time I hear that number, it fucks with me a little bit. He's going to play there. He knows that Aaron Rodgers is his best chance to succeed. I think he's one that will ultimately play under the franchise tag because he doesn't want to lose a year of his value. There's not the life expectancy at the wide receiver position that there is for a quarterback, right? And you can do nothing more to build your value than be Davante Adams with Aaron Rodgers. He's 30. You're not sitting out that year playing hardball, and I think it's similar to what Green Bay did. We don't give Gutekunst or whatever Aaron Rodgers calls him the credit, but I think he sees that there's some leverage that's lost in all of this, and if he sits out this year, he might sign a good 1 or 2 year contract next year, but he's not going to build his value anywhere near where he would be just playing with Rodgers.
Yeah, I think I largely agree with you. He has been very disrespected through this process, though, ultimately. And, receivers are, they take that stuff hard. So we'll see how it plays out.
You call him divas?
I don't like to throw the D word around. Okay. But maybe a little bit.
It's just looking at the cap numbers, though, real quick to jump in. It's tough. I mean, he's already the 4th largest cap number just on the franchise tag. Like, this is kind of the ceiling for a wide receiver. So short of tying him to Rodgers for the next 3 years where he's uncuttable, there's not a whole lot that the Packers can really throw his way, right? I mean, we saw Hopkins got up to $27 million in is his max cap number, and that's just not a great way to build a team, committing that much of your cap to one position where they touch the ball maybe 100 times a year if you're lucky, and they're also fragile, right? Like, he's missed 2 games last year, he missed a couple games the year before. That's just a lot of impact to play on basically a per play basis, right? If you think about them getting 100 receptions, that's $200,000 a catch.
Yeah. Well, and even if they make it work and extend him and push some of that money out, I mean, what does that do to your roster, right? Like, there's only so many of those types of deals that you can make, and Rodgers' deal is fucking massive. So,
wait, it's team friendly. I thought Rodgers said it was team friendly.
Totally team friendly. Yeah, just ask Aaron Rodgers' agent. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's, boy. Feel for Davante Adams, because trust me, if any receiver is worth the amount of money that DeAndre Hopkins is signed for, and it's Davante Adams. He deserves to be in that conversation. It's not happening in Green Bay, and unfortunately, because of the franchise tag, they hold his rights and that power. So he has to deal with it. All right. I think that covers the majority of the big news. Is there anything we missed here? Any last shots you want to get in before we close out?
There's 2 things. One was unexpected. So Davante Adams is 30 years old. His career earnings are only $82 million. He just did not make money in the early part of his career. Maximum cap number before this was 17 million. So tough for him. And the one thing that I did want to bring up, didn't want to squeeze in and cut you off, but you did bring up Taysom Hill. Top 20 QB money for Taysom Hill, and the Saints are still looking for a quarterback. He slots in just behind Josh Allen and just ahead of Kyler Murray on the cap hit, assuming Kyler Murray doesn't get paid before the draft like he wants to.
Good Lord. The Saints, you give them credit for how they've structured deals that allows them to continue to stay cap compliant and all this stuff. That's one particular player and deal that is just, I mean, get rid of Taysom Hill and your job
Well, then
becomes
you
a
don't
lot
get
easier.
Sean Payton back. That's the problem. You got to keep Taysom so that Payton comes back next year.
Package deal.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, that's tough.
I do also love that Josh McDaniels is going after Brandon Bolden, because why doesn't everybody just take the Patriot way? It's been successful for a long time. Never anywhere else, but you want to do that. And
Yeah.
then last shout out is for Andrew Whitworth. Fantastic career. So happy that he got to finally go out with a Super Bowl, and of all things against his former team.
Very cool.
Yeah, so much, again, blood, sweat, and tears. And it was after winning the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. He is the epitome of what you hope that your idols are. And I want him to come back selfishly, but I mean, damn, he's old.
Yeah.
And he's still in the trenches. Like, it's different being old in the trenches than it is being old behind the trenches, like Tom Brady is, where you just lay down if something starts coming after you.
It's true, but when you're that big and just that good, I mean, those guys that play that long, obviously their technique is amazing and everything. I mean, we saw Jason Peters do the same. Not to the same level, but Jason Peters played pretty well for the Bears this year at 39 years old, literally coming off a boat to sign a deal. Right. So something about those big tackles, right? They're just like, all right, fuck it, let's go, like strap up. Yeah. But yes, congratulations on a great career to Andrew Whitworth for sure. And yeah, that'll do it for us. So thanks for listening, everybody. Happy New Year. And we will bring you any news that comes down here. If the Watson deal, I was going to say, is consummated, although that feels inappropriate. But if the Watson deal goes through, we'll obviously fill you in on our thoughts there. But
at least you use consummated instead of consensual, because that was the real hang up. Yeah. Who ultimately pays the break lease fee for at home with Baker Mayfield? Is it Baker or Progressive?
Ooh, Progressive is probably yeah. What do you think that marketing team is sitting there doing right now? What are they hoping happens?
Hoping he retires, and then they're just like, okay, well, at least we know where home is right now.
Yeah, Jesus. We will update you on Baker as well. So don't worry about that. But thanks for listening, everybody. Happy New Year, and we will talk to you later.